Welcome to Chips and Chalk, where we talk real K-12 technology. Not the sales pitch, not the conference version, what actually works in schools. I'm your host, Adam Swinchock, and I spent a career leading technology K-12 environments. And if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that the gap between what is promised and what actually happens in a school district is massive. This podcast is about closing that gap. Welcome back to Chips and Chalk, real talk from the intersection of classrooms and K-12 technology, where the polished conference presentations stop and the real stories start. And today, we're talking about filtering. Or maybe more accurately, we're talking about what people think filtering is doing versus what's actually happening. Because if you've worked in a school technology department for more than 5 minutes, you've heard some version of this. Why wasn't that blocked? And if you haven't, just give it a minute or two, that phone call is coming across. Because that question always comes, usually at the worst possible moment. Usually after a student finds something they shouldn't. Usually when a parent saw it first, and then suddenly the principal wants answers, the superintendent wants answers, the parent wants answers, and somehow the internet is expected to have been perfectly controlled. And that was where we start today. Now, this episode isn't a defense of filtering, and it's surely not a takedown of filtering either. It's something we do a lot on this show, pull back the curtain on how this stuff actually works, because the brochure version sounds amazing to everybody. Safe browsing, AI monitoring, real-time intervention, student protection, sure. But behind the scenes, it's categories, exceptions, false positives, false negatives, Google Sites game mirrors, AI workarounds, students bringing personal MacBooks to, air quote, enhance their assignments. And yes, group chat sharing ways around your controls before IT even knows there's a loophole. Because here's a rule in school technology nobody puts in the keynote. Every control you put in place eventually gets pressure tested. Tested by a student trying to get around it every single time. Why? Because students often have more time and fewer responsibilities than adults. And most of the time, they expend more energy trying to get out of doing the assignment than it would have just taken to do the assignment. Every teacher listening knows that's true. And weirdly, that's part of what makes this conversation interesting. Because this episode really isn't about filters. It's about systems. It's about expectations. It's about layers. And it's about the very human mistake of expecting technology to solve people problems. We're going to talk about why wasn't it blocked is often the wrong question. Why students will route around your controls. Why filters are one layer and not the layer. How monitoring, alerts, and parent tools fit into this whole thing. And why this all has more to do with risk management than certainty. Because behind every "the filter failed" story, there's usually a bigger story no one put in the board report. And those are the stories we do here. So let's start with a question every tech department has heard. Usually at the worst possible moment as well. First thing in the morning. Why wasn't that blocked? All right, let's start with a story. Because this is usually how these conversations begin. Not with theory, not with policy, with an incident. Close your eyes and picture it. Monday morning, a primary student is on a district device, somehow ends up on a first-person shooter game. A parent sees it, and now the chain reaction starts. Emails, phone calls, carrier pigeons, smoke signals, Pony Express, heck, maybe even telepathy. From the parent, to the teacher, to the principal, to the superintendent, and eventually IT. And here comes the question. Why wasn't that blocked? If you've worked in school tech, you can feel your skin crawl and almost hear the tone of the question. Because it isn't curiosity, it's expectation, maybe some frustration, sometimes blame, and underneath it is an assumption. The filter failed. But let's unpack that a bit, because often that isn't what happened at all. In this case, when we dig in further, the game wasn't sitting on some obvious site called shoot'emupkidsgames.com. It was sitting on sites.google.com, and that matters. because the filter often isn't evaluating every single embedded object in every page the way a human would. It's making decisions based on categories, reputation, domains known, patterns, and sites.google.com is usually categorized as education, collaboration, and general content, because most of what lives there is legitimate. For many districts, teacher resources, student projects, classroom pages all live there. Even some well-known textbook manufacturers host their supplemental resources there. The problem, someone figured out how to host a game there. And not just one, thousands of someones. Because these things get mirrored, copied, replicated, shared in group chats, rebuilt the minute one gets blocked. And this is intentional. That's the part that matters. These aren't random accidents. These are people specifically building content inside trusted domains because they know schools can't just block the entire domain. Because if we block all of Google sites, now we break instruction completely. And this is where people outside of the work sometimes miss the tension. Block too little, people say you aren't protecting kids. Block too much, teachers can't deliver instruction. Welcome to K-12 technology. That's the tightrope. After you're done explaining this, it's usually followed by, well, why doesn't Google do something about it? Fair question. But remember, Google isn't reviewing every page manually before it exists. It operates at an enormous scale. Millions of pages, user-generated content, reporting systems, reactive abuse enforcement. And by the time one bad page gets removed, 3 more exist. Because again, every control gets pressure tested. And let me say something uncomfortable, but true. People often ask filtering to do something impossible. They want open access for learning, 0 exposure to bad content, no false positives, no false negatives, and perfect prevention. Those things can and usually do conflict. That's reality. Filtering is not certainty. It's risk reduction. And there's a big difference. And this is usually where I tell people the better question isn't, why wasn't that blocked? The better question is, what happened? What layer missed it? And what do we do to adjust now? Very different conversation. One is blame, one is systems thinking. Because if the expectation is nothing inappropriate can ever get through, that isn't a filtering expectation, that's an impossible standard. Especially when students are operating within an ecosystem where sites replicate instantly, workarounds get shared, trusted platforms can be misused, and teenagers have way too much free time. And yes, sometimes more ingenuity aimed at avoiding work than doing it. And that's why this episode exists, because most people think filtering is a wall. It isn't. It's a layer, an important layer, but still just a layer. And if you misunderstand that, you misunderstand the whole system. So when someone says, why wasn't that blocked? Sometimes the honest answer is because the internet is messy, because controls have limits, because risk isn't elimination, and because teenagers happen. And if that sounds too real, good. That's chips and chalk. Now, let's talk about what filtering actually does do well. And let's level set something because I don't want this sounding like filters don't work. That's not the message. The message is filters aren't Hogwarts magic, but they matter a lot. One of the biggest problems with filtering is when it works, nobody notices. And that's most of the time. These systems are blocking things all day long. Thousands of requests, constantly. Stuff nobody ever sees. And because people don't see what got stopped, they only noticed what got through. That creates a distorted view of things. It's like judging a firewall only by the one thing that worried you, while ignoring everything it quietly prevented. A good filter is doing a lot behind the scenes, blocking malicious sites, adult content, phishing, proxy tools, obvious game domains, malware, delivery sites across thousands of devices instantly. That matters. That's real protection, and we need to give credit where credit is due. Now, let me translate some of that out of the IT speak, especially for you that are administrators or classroom teachers or even parents. Because bad domains, malicious patterns, and category risks sound like a cybersecurity webinar nobody wanted to attend at 5 p.m. on a Friday right before Christmas break. So, plain English, bad domains, that's the obvious stuff. The internet equivalent of a sketchy alley behind a gas station. The site screaming, you probably shouldn't be here. Another good example are fake free movie sites with 17 pop-ups that you want a free iPhone. Download sites promising Minecraft mods and delivering malware instead. Pages where every button looks like a fake download button. Just digital bad neighborhoods. The filter sees those and says, nope. Malicious patterns? That's when the internet starts acting shady. A website tries to silently install something, flag. A page starts bouncing through suspicious redirects faster than a teenager changing tabs when a teacher walks by, flag. Phishing links pretending to be something they're not, flag. That's malicious pattern detection. The internet acting suspicious and the system noticing. What about category risks? This is the everyday stuff. Things schools often restrict by category. Gambling, adult content, obvious gaming sites, proxy sites built to bypass school filters, and those totally educational websites hiding 400 games under the math enrichment. Sure, very academic. And filters can block whole categories, which beats chasing around thousands of sites one at a time, because teenagers create workarounds faster than adults can file tickets. And why do we do all this filtering? Not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because of regulations. You'll hear people reference Children's Internet Protection Act, or CIPA. That can sound intimidating, or like one of those acronyms everybody nods at and hopes nobody asks follow-up questions. In English, CIPA basically says if schools receive certain federal funding, you need reasonable protections in place to help block harmful online content for students. Emphasis on the reasonable protections. Not magic, not perfection, reasonable protections. That distinction is important. CIPA is less, nothing bad can ever happen on a student's screen, and much more, you need a real safety strategy in place. Big difference. It's seat belts, not a promise nobody ever has a car accident. It's smoke detectors, not a guarantee nothing can ever burn. That's a much better way to think about this, and this matters because people sometimes assume if one site slips through, the district must be out of compliance. No, that's not the case at all. That's not how this works. One miscategorized site, one mirror site, one edge case miss, that does not automatically mean a school violated CIPA. If it did, nobody would ever be compliant because the internet changes too fast. Compliance is about whether you have filtering in place, policies in place, supervision in place, and processes in place for reasonable efforts to protect students. It is not a standard of perfection, and perfection is impossible. Reasonable layer protection, that's the goal. Filters stop a lot of nonsense, a lot. Stuff most people never see. And if your filter wasn't working, you'd really know it by second period. And let's not forget, schools aren't doing this because it's optional. There are compliance obligations, legal obligations, student safety obligations. Filtering is part of the baseline. It's not a luxury. Where filtering really shines is on the obvious stuff. Known bad domains, blocked. Malicious patterns, flagged. Category risks, stopped before anyone even notices. And ironically, that invisible success is part of the problem. Because nobody emails IT and says, hey, thanks, I noticed the filter blocked 42,000 bad requests today. It's not how it works. You get the email when something slips through, usually in all caps. Modern filtering has evolved too. It isn't just allow or block anymore. Now it includes behavior signals risks, indicators, alert reporting, identity-based policies, time-based controls, grade-level profiles. That's layered. That's sophisticated. It's not the old-school denialist many of you are used to. Many of these platforms also pair filtering with a layered approach with monitoring. Now, I'm going to asterisk this with it's usually at an additional cost, but when we look at the strategy with layers, they work together perfectly. Securely Filter with Securely Classroom is one good example. Now the question isn't only can students get there, it becomes what are students doing when they get there? Products like these work in tandem to filter out the bad stuff, but also a real-time view into the device itself. There's also an alerting layer. With Securely, it's called Aware. Concerning searches, self-harm indicators, threat indicators, risky access attempts, things adults might not know otherwise. These products alert administrators or monitors in real time who, what, and when these events happen. That moves beyond filtering. That's intervention. Good filtering also reduces casual bad decisions. That gets overlooked. Sometimes the goal isn't stopping the determined kid with too much time in a group chat. Sometimes it's stopping the everyday poor choice. Filters do that really well. I'd like to put it this way. A good filter blocks a lot. A great filtering strategy reduces risk. Those are different things. The second one is bigger. Here's another truth nobody says enough. Success in filtering is mostly invisible. Failure is public in 5 minutes. That's the job. So when something slips through, that doesn't automatically mean filtering failed. It may mean the layer did what it could and something landed outside its edge. The real question isn't, is filtering working? It's what role is filtering supposed to play in the larger strategy here in our school district? If you expect it to be the whole strategy, you're asking too much of one tool, because filtering is a foundation, a first layer, a risk reducer, a safety net, not the whole system. And the districts that understand that usually make much better decisions. All right, we've talked about what people expect filtering to do. We've talked about what it actually does well. And now let's talk about what it cannot do by itself. Because this may be the biggest misunderstanding of all. There's a quiet assumption in a lot of schools, we bought the filters so we're covered. It sounds comforting, it's also incomplete. Because filtering was never designed to be a complete student safety strategy. It's a layer, an important one, but still a layer. Filtering cannot replace teacher supervision, classroom management, digital citizenship, clear expectations for students, and parental involvement. It can't redirect a student. It can't read context the way a teacher can. It can't look at a behavior and ask, where's this really going and what's going on here? That still takes people, highly skilled people, because a device in front of a student, even a well-managed one, still requires adults, structure, guidance, presence, because students don't just use technology, they explore it, they pressure test it. Sometimes they break it, sometimes creatively break it, sometimes with more determination than anyone would like. That's not a technology problem, that's a human one. Now, to be fair and transparent, vendors have recognized this gap, and they profit from it. What's the mantra? If you're good at something, don't do it for free. They know filtering alone isn't enough, which is why many platforms have evolved into layered ecosystems. Just like we talked about in previous segments, Securely Filter paired with Securely Classroom and adding in the parent engagement piece, Securely Home, that's not just a filter anymore. That's a stack, a school layer, a classroom layer, and a home layer. All those players working together being active participants in the experience is invaluable because each layer addresses a different part of the problem. At the school level, and in the event a home level, if your district has a one-to-one take-home program, the filter helps manage access and reduce risk. In the classroom, a teacher can view screens, guide students, close tabs, keep instruction moving. And at home, families can monitor activity, receive alerts, set stricter restrictions, pause access, reinforce expectations outside of the school. That's a much bigger story than the filter blocked the site. That's a layered support model. And I like this because it reinforces something important. Student safety was never supposed to sit entirely on the shoulders of one tool, or one department for that matter. It's distributed, it's shared, layered. That's the model. And if you think about it, pairing filtering, classroom visibility, and parent tools in one ecosystem makes the point of this whole episode. Safety in schools works in layers. That's the thesis. Now, does it replace supervision? Not a chance. It supports supervision. Huge difference. Because someone still has to interpret what they're seeing, respond to alerts, have conversations when necessary, and also intervene. Technology can surface things. People still do the work. And that's where these tools are the strongest. Not when they pretend to automate safety, but when they strengthen the adults around students. And many of these platforms go even further. They include alerting for concerning searches, self-harm indicators, threats, risky behavior patterns. That moves beyond filtering, that's support, and that's intervention. Now, a hot button topic right now in K-12 is one-to-one deployments, screen time, and especially with students that are in our K to 3 bands, just making sure that they're not spending too much time on screens. And quite frankly, that is a great discussion to have here within the filtering side of it, but we're going to leave that for another time. Because a lot of people are going to hear this segment and say, well, if students aren't taking the devices home in the first place, then why do we need to filter them at home anyway? It's just one more thing that we don't have to deal with. And they're not wrong, but the answer is just not that simple either. We want to keep it focused on the filtering side of things more than anything else, at least for this episode. All right, so we've talked a lot here about filtering. We've talked about what it can't do, and what it can't do alone. So let's kind of wrap it up here and put it all together and look at it in the terms of layers. We've got the filtering as one layer, and monitoring is another layer, and the parent tool is another layer. What does the strategy look like to put it all together? Because the answer isn't buy a better filter. But then what is it? Here's my take. A real student safety strategy has at least 5 layers to it. All right, so layer 1, sensible technical controls. Start with the obvious, and by sensible, I mean realistic, practical. Controls that reduce risk without breaking learning. Because sensible doesn't mean block everything. It means make smart decisions. There's a difference. Filtering, device management, access control, grade level policies, age-appropriate restriction, basic hygiene. That's your foundation. And let's be honest, sometimes people want controls that are outlandish. Like, can't the system just know what every student intends before they click? No, that's science fiction. Or can't we just block every bad thing on the internet forever? Also no. If we could do that, half of the K-12 tech departments would retire tomorrow. Also, a lot of places will function on the way of allow-only lists. So they block the entire internet and then require staff members to provide lists of all of the resources that they're going to use throughout the year. And while that sounds fantastic, most websites are not just static websites like they used to be in the 90s and early 2000s. They access content distribution networks and lots of different things. For example, to get started with a new textbook vendor that we may have in our district, we may have to allow 20 different IP addresses through our firewall and 15 different websites through our filter just to be able to access the content that they need to. And if you're a large district with a lot of different resources, you can multiply that type of experience by however many resources you use. So it sounds great to make sure that you block everything and only allow what's needed. But quite frankly, that's not security. That's essentially students just kind of wrapped in a metaphorical bubble wrap. It's a museum exhibit. Schools still have to be able to function. Learning still has to be able to happen. So sensible controls mean not trying to block the whole internet, trying to reduce unnecessary risk. Because over control can break learning just as much as under control can create risk. It's a balancing act, and it's one you're going to walk every day. This is the foundation, not the full house, just the foundation. So layer 2 is visibility. You can't manage what you can't see. This is where classroom monitoring, alerting, reporting, and trend analysis comes in. All of those matter. Not to create surveillance culture, but an awareness culture. There's a difference between support and surveillance. Important distinction. Layer 3 is the human layer. This is where schools often over-focus on tools and under-focus on response. So developing what happens when an alert fires off, if a student hits a troubling piece of content, if a teacher sees concerning behavior, is there a protocol in place? Who responds? Who follows up? What gets documented? Because tools without a response plan, that's just noise. And quite frankly, the IT department can't monitor stuff 24/7. Multiple people have to be involved. The 4th layer is the education layer. And this probably is the most underinvested layer. Teaching students digital citizenship, online judgment, ethical AI use, responsible behavior online. Because eventually the controls aren't going to be there. Maybe they just aren't there at your house. And judgment has to take over. That's the goal. Not dependency on filters, but capacity in students. And the 5th layer is the partnership layer. Not one layer can do the heavy lift all on its own. Schools, families, teachers, students, shared expectations, shared responsibility, shared language. Because if school expectations stop at dismissal, that system has a gap. And that's it. That's the strategy. Layers, not products, layers. And if the district does that well, they usually talk less about the tools and more about the systems. That's not an accident. We've talked about a lot today, and maybe your head's spinning a little bit, but before we depart, I want to talk to the teachers just a little bit. So for the teachers, and if there are any administrators listening, maybe just step out of the room for a minute or two. I'll wait. Okay. Teachers, coming close. Here's what we're going to do. Let me say this quietly like it's just between us. If your district has these tools like Securely Classroom or other visibility tools, monitoring dashboards, whatever, and you haven't really used them much, I'm not going to tell on you here. This is a safe space. I'm here to offer you something better. A get out of PD free pass, if you will, because you all may already have these tools sitting in your environment right now that can make your life easier tomorrow morning. And nobody may have shown you how to do it. Happens all the time. So this isn't guilt. This is opportunity. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to start with one move. Learn to use one feature well. Just one. Maybe learning how to view the screens during independent work, closing distracting tabs, pushing a link to the 25 students instead of them having them type a URL wrong, lock screens when giving directions. That alone can completely change the flow of your classroom. Use it for support, not gotchas either. Don't use these tools to say, I got you, I caught them. Use it as, I can help keep them focused. That mindset creates a big difference and students feel that. Let it reduce your friction. Use these tools to make teaching easier. Less, eyes up here, close that tab, stop clicking that. And more, one click and move on. That's energy back for you. And learn one advanced feature a month. One. Not 10, one. Small gains stack over time. Also, ask for training, specifically. And yes, I'm saying this as a tech person. Ask us, seriously. We want to teach. We get tired of putting out fires all the time. What we'd rather be doing is building something, a stronger user base, because stronger users mean fewer preventable issues, fewer distractions, fewer support tickets, and fewer fires. Everybody wins in that scenario. Heck, bring a friend or two. Learn together. Adoption spreads faster in small peer groups than one-off trainings ever do. We've all sat in those auditoriums where somebody's at the very top just pontificating to a room full of 200. It doesn't work. Small groups always work in these settings. Ask your building leadership for time, real time, PLC time, department time, because tools don't become practice in isolation. They become practice when people have time to work with them. And if your district doesn't end of your survey, don't just write, we need more tech training. When I did this, I hated that. That's too vague. And candidly, your higher level admin may do the silent eye roll on you. Not because they don't care, but because it's too broad to act on. It's literally like saying in your building, a student can't read. Okay, which student? What grade? What skill? What intervention? It's too broad to solve. Same here. Be specific. Ask for filtering strategy training or classroom management software strategies. Practical examples and ways to use these tools instructionally, because vague requests get vague responses. Specific requests get programs built around them. And that be the simplest way to say, don't ask for more tech training, ask for the kind of training you'll actually use on Tuesday morning. Most tech departments, mine included, would rather spend an hour teaching proactively than 10 hours responding reactively. That's capacity building. That's how systems get stronger. And remember, these two tools do not replace classroom management. They support it. Layers, always layers. The best classroom technology use isn't the flashy innovation. It's using the ones you already have and reducing friction with them. That's success, not more tools. Better use of the ones that you have makes a huge difference in your life. So maybe the challenge is this. Don't ask, what does this tool do? Ask, how could this make teaching easier for me? That's a much better starting point. Okay, you can let your admins back in the room now. All right, let's land this plane. Because if there's one myth I'd love this episode to challenge, it's the idea of perfect filtering. Because it doesn't exist. Never has, never will. And pretending it does creates the wrong expectations for everyone. Because the goal was never perfect control. The goal was always reasonable protection. Filtering is not a silver bullet. It's a seatbelt. Important? Absolutely. Necessary? Absolutely. The whole strategy? Of course not. No one says, we have seatbelts so I can drive how I want. That would be absurd. Same idea here. Schools accidentally ask filtering to carry too much weight. We ask it to solve student behavior, poor judgment, supervision gaps, digital citizenship, and even parenting gaps sometimes. A filter can't carry all of that. No technology can. Those are human system questions, not software settings. The best districts I've seen don't rely on one tool, one vendor, one setting. They rely on layers, people, processes, and partnership. That's the work. That's the system. That's the stuff nobody puts in the sales demo, which is basically the whole point of this show. Remember, you can't filter your way out of every problem, but you can build systems strong enough to handle reality. See you next time. If you're in K-12, whether you're leading it, supporting it, or living it in the classroom, this is the work. If this episode hit home, go ahead and follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if there's something you want us to dig into, or a real-world situation you're working through, we're going to open up that soon. And as we go forward with Chips and Chalk, we're going to keep cutting through the noise. No fluff, no theory without reality, just what actually works in schools. Thanks for listening.